first words were, "It's caucus time."
Well, they are today on the recording, that's for sure.
My first ever words.
I say recording. We're not recording. We're live. But on the recording that we're going to have for all of posterity afterwards, those will be your first words.
It's caucus time.
It's caucus time. There you go. Welcome, everybody. It's Thursday. It's noon.
It's Ryan. It's Mason. It's caucus time.
It's time. And we are happy to be with you here today. We've had a couple of good ones in a row. I mean, we had a short one 2 weeks ago talking about patents, but that was a fantastic event. There's some really neat stuff coming out about that. The video of the event actually will be up within the next 24 hours. So go and check that out on our YouTube page and Rumble. It'd be really neat to watch if you weren't able to partake. There is still good stuff for you there. But yeah, last week we had Charles Haywood on. It was a good time. We got some more interview suggestions. So we are plowing through. But there's a lot today, though, that needs to be covered. In fact, some new things from the last 30 or so minutes that are going to be covered, but we'll get into it all. I'll remind you first, go to unauthorizedcaucus.com. Unauthorizedcaucus.com is where you can sign up for the email. You can make sure you find all of our socials. You can see the podcast. You can watch the past videos if you'd rather watch than listen. Rumble, YouTube, your choice. They are all there. And of course, you can just go to Unauthorized Caucus and stream this every week. It is there as well. But wherever you are, if you're on socials, go ahead and hit the like and share buttons for us, and then subscribe while you're there. If there's a little notification toggle, turn it on so you don't miss it. But then share the link to some friends, because we're going to dive into some fun stuff this week, some spicy stuff this week, and give you some opinions that you probably agree with, but you may not know that you agree with until we get done telling you. Because we're going to connect some dots. So
this might be the spiciest week ever, because I don't know if American politics have ever been spicier than they are right now.
That's true. That's true. Well, first of all, let's dive in. We'll just real quick, let me hit the breaking news just so that everyone knows what day it is and what's going on. Steve Bannon has been sentenced to 4 months in federal jail. 4 months beginning on July 1st. That's what I thought. July 1st. You do the math. We're getting out of jail, what, 4 days before the election? Tell me that it's political election interference without telling me that it's political election interference.
Exactly.
Right? I tweeted that, but it's 100% accurate.
Well, KJP, I mean, it's like her slip up the other day. Oh, I can't comment on these trials because it has to do with the election.
I mean, we can't talk about 2024 items. Really? Why not?
Yeah.
Is it political? Very interesting. So that has happened. But the really interesting thing, and you mentioned this in the hallway as we were coming down and getting ready to go, this is a Trump judge. Just Judge Carl Nichols, who was, and this is, he just was moved. He was a U.S. District of Columbia Court of Appeals judge, or a district court judge. There's so many layers. He was a district court judge for the District of Columbia, and he's actually, very interestingly, just this year taken over as a judge on the FISA court, the U.S. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. It's very interesting. So that is not necessarily connected, because this is ongoing, this trial, which, by the way, I've seen a few people, and I'll just mention, I mean, there could have been something done about this potentially, because all of this goes back to the 2021 Unselect Committee, the sham January 6th committee that Nancy Pelosi put together, and a contempt of Congress charge that came out of it, which I don't see Mayorkas in jail for contempt of Congress or anyone else, but here we go, Steve Bannon in jail right before the election, taking off a major voice. So that's what this is related to. This is all the way back to like September of 2021. They subpoenaed Steve Bannon. He said no. Then at the last minute he was going to say yes, and they were already before the judge, and the judge said that's a ploy. I'm not going to take it. I mean, he really has been this guy. When they say a judge that hates Steve Bannon, I have to agree with that one just based on the facts of watching, because at different points he has pretty much said no. I mean, even if it looks like, oh, fine, I'm gonna be dragged in, so I might as well agree to go testify. Like, okay, fine, good. Isn't that the whole point? Shouldn't this just be a threat to get you to do what someone wanted you to do in the first place? But no, it's a punishment. It's not about actually getting people in front of the committee or this or that or the other. It's a punishment the whole time. So this has been going on since 2022. And there's been delays after delays. He was actually, the trial began in July of 22, and I think they found him guilty. Yeah, the jury found him guilty July 22 of 22. They found him guilty on both charges. And it has just been hanging since then. Because in October of that year, they sentenced Bannon to 4 months in prison and a $6,500 fine. But it's just been ongoing because there was an appeal, and then there was a this, and then there was a that. And here we are finally down to just a few, like 3 weeks ago, An appellate court unanimously upheld the conviction. I guess that was the last line of appeals. And then, wham, here comes the DOJ's motion to lift Bannon's stay of sentence and report him to prison. And the judge says, yes, go. So that was today, and he's going in July 1st. Steve Bannon is going to jail because Liz Cheney hates him. Judge Nichols apparently hates him, and we have to silence a major figure right before the election.
Right.
I mean, you can challenge me on the facts, but if you and I both go and do this, it is, in my mind, pretty unavoidable. That is the conclusion to make here. So there's the news of the day. But there was news last Thursday.
Yes.
About 3 hours after we had our show.
Yep.
And the world went wild.
Yeah. So we got to talk about that. Because,
yes. What happened last Thursday afternoon, Mason?
No, I don't really remember. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it is one of maybe the biggest piece of news this year, the biggest happening this year, the only happening probably this year, the only thing that matters that's happened so far. Because people say nothing ever happens, you know, the wheels just keep turning, and politics is just a bunch of headlines that we forget about, and none of it's a big deal. But no, Trump was convicted on all 34 felony charges in the hush money case that we've talked about multiple times.
And I'll remind you, 11 of those felony charges that he was convicted on are for receiving a piece of mail.
Yes, and they were all misdemeanors. Until they changed them.
Oh, yes.
Yes, like it's such a shame. These were all misdemeanors. They changed the statute of limitations, and now he faces a maximum sentence of over 100 years in prison.
Because it's, what is it, 4 years per count or something? Yeah.
Right, insanity. I mean, they're probably not going to do that. I would really like to see if they even sentence him to like 4 months in prison. If they tried to put Trump in prison, I don't even know what would happen. It's hard to conceive of. Maybe nothing, but maybe it would be like January 6th all over again.
I have a feeling that would, and that's the thing. And this is, make no mistake, I am quite positive at this point, the left is trying to foment some sort of civil unrest and violence. Like American against American, they are trying their darndest. And I mean, they got real close in a lot of the riots in, well, 2014, 15, if we're being honest, all the way through 2020, but especially 2020.
Yeah.
Like I'm positive that's what they want, because they are the ones who continue to push the envelope. Now, especially, they continue to push the envelope with stuff that is unprecedented and completely outside boundaries. I mean, to your point, fine. So you don't like that he paid hush money to someone and you think that it was done improperly. You go down, was not bank fraud, but you go down through it and it was probably, these are misdemeanors. This is literally a financial infraction.
Yeah.
This is not a felony.
Right.
The only reason it's trumped up to a felony is because it's Trump. And it's an election year, and we can send him to jail and stop him from campaigning or whatever it is. And yet, at every turn, it has flipped on them. It has become, if you strike me down, I will be even more powerful. Everything goes back to Star Wars, at least in this. But
there are campaign finance issues in probably every presidential campaign that exists. And they're not a big deal. I mean, somebody ends up paying a fine, and you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I won't do it again. And you fire the person that made that error on the accounting sheet. But you don't get sentenced to 100 years in prison, or possibly sentenced to 100 years in prison. That's just not how it works. But, I mean, I don't think it's possible to bait the right into getting violent, because I don't think that there are any historical circumstances where civil unrest has started with the right getting violent. It has always started with the left getting violent. If you look at, I mean, all the communist uprisings over the last century, it was never the right that got violent to put those down. It was all, I mean, look at Spain. Like, the right didn't get violent until the left was literally killing nuns, you know, until they were just like killing Christians because. And I mean,
honestly, just for the sake of clarity, you're saying left and right. I mean, we have a modern American understanding of that, but at this point, we're talking about the authoritarians, the humanist authoritarians, the secular authoritarians versus the traditional values folks.
Right. I mean, that's what it is now, but those are the camps.
Yeah,
then it was Bolsheviks versus nationalists.
Right, exactly. At that point, like, I would separate, because we're crossing a lot of historical boundaries here with poor labels in America already as it is. But yeah, your point is taken. See, this is I don't disagree with that at all. We don't have any historical context. The only thing is we don't have any historical precedent for what they are doing now in America, what we're watching, which is why there's a giant question mark in my mind. I would tend to say that you're right. I don't know if they could ever push the right into some sort of violent conflict. That's not what we want. That is not how we settle things. But I've also never seen, we as a nation have never seen some of the stuff that is happening right now.
Right.
So we really are in uncharted territory. So we've got some precedent to see and kind of make guesses on, but we are way out into uncharted waters on a lot of this stuff. So that's why I look at it and say I don't think it'll work necessarily, but the left is absolutely trying to start violence. That's the point. Which of course we know how that they would start something and then blame it on everyone else. That's what happened on January 6th. That's what happened. It's a setup. It's entrapment at each point. But
yeah, it's American politics will never be the same again, ever, because there are two possibilities, or maybe three, but either Trump gets reelected, the Republicans are back in office, and then they strike back in exactly the same way that the Democrats have striked against the right, strike back in exactly the same way, which I think that is the best case scenario from where we are now, because it's recognizing the existential conflict that we are in for our country. But alternatively, the right, or the Republicans, the conservative wing of American politics, Trump could get reelected, and then we would just be like, okay, let's have a return to principles and decency and just let the process keep going. Let's restore the process. And Biden gets his book deals and speaking deals and lives out the rest of his life in luxury. But that is not preferable, because as soon as the left gets back into power, they will keep it going. They will put DeSantis in prison. They will put Marco Rubio in prison. I mean, they're going to do everybody. They're going to wipe out their enemies, because that's what you do in politics. You wipe out your enemies. So that's what we have to do if we're going to survive, if this country is going to survive, and if there's going to be any future for people like us that have conservative and traditional sensibilities. And the third alternative is Trump loses, and then it's just over. I don't even know what happens at that point. It's just at that point, let's accelerate this to the end, wherever it's going to be. But yeah, those are the three possibilities, and I think that Trump is going to win. So I don't think that third possibility is going to happen. And I think Biden and the Democrats know that Trump is going to win, because Trump pulled record fundraising numbers right after his conviction in all of American history. I don't know if that's adjusted for inflation, but probably adjusted for inflation. Yes, it is.
I
record
think so,
fundraising
yes.
numbers.
I'm pretty sure.
$200 million in a single day.
Not a single day. It was like 3 days.
Okay, still, that's insane.
In the first 24 hours, they had raised less than the first 24 hours after the conviction, Thursday afternoon. They had raised like $55 million and climbing, and then by the time they got to Sunday, it was at $200 million. But the bonkers thing about that, and what tells me Trump just won the election, which I think I said multiple times last Thursday and Friday. Trump just won the election, because of that $200 million, there were a lot of big dollar donors, which is a whole story in and of itself, because the big money people who are not necessarily conservative or right wing in any way, shape, or form are starting to really shift and just openly talk about, yeah, we're with Trump, and give him money, because they all see the writing on the wall. They recognize the Biden administration is terrible for the economy, is terrible for them, and is destroying the country. But $70+ million of that first $200 million haul was all small dollar donations. That's huge, because small dollar donors are the heart and soul of what gets you elected. Big money, yes, puts gas in the tank. Small dollar donors usually can't afford it, so when they give you $20 or $20.24, like a lot of people gave, $17.76, revealing a little bit of my own personal preference there. When those folks give, they can't just afford to give that much, really. Those are the people who are hyped up enough that they're going to get people to come and vote for you. They're taking their family to the polling place, shoving them inside, go vote. No sitting this one out. No, I forgot. Get out of my car and go vote. I drove you here. That's that kind of person when they're donating the $20 and $25 and $30 donations. That was $70+ million of that haul. But the most shocking thing of all, not the donation total, but the total number of donors. Over 30% of them, nearly 1/3 of the donors, are first-time donors.
Wow.
That's huge. Like, that is cataclysmic, shocking numbers.
Yeah.
That 1/3 of your largest historic haul ever for a presidential candidate had never given before. That tells me that the sleeping giant of America just woke up and said, I've had enough. I'm even going to give him money. And we know people personally who were not there
Right.
a few months ago and then kind of got there and now they're giving money. Like, this is a big deal. I think that the election is over, which is why, to your point, and this is what I've heard and I agree with. It's not that they're not going to let Trump get elected. They are not going to let Trump get sworn in. And I would tend to agree with that. That's where they're going to put the real last stand of whatever shenanigans they're going to pull aren't going to be to change the election. We know there will be shenanigans they're going to cheat and we're going to make it too big to rig. But come January 2025, what are they going to do? Because I don't think they'll stop at nothing at this point. I mean, their mask is off. We're pulling out all the stops.
Right.
Jail them, persecute them, fine them, just blatantly ignore any possible law or precedent. So what are they going to ignore in January of 2025? That makes me very worried and curious for our country to see what happens. It's going to be very interesting.
Which means that Trump needs to be ready. Trump and his allies need to be ready to completely clean house, to actually drain the swamp on like the first week this time, rather than, okay, that bureaucracy is a little too entrenched. Let's check out this one. Oh, that one's a little too entrenched. Let's look at this one. Oh, okay, there's all this stuff in the military. Well, we'll deal with that later. And then all of Trump's advisors and allies stabbing him in the back and unable to do anything effective. Like, no, that has to change this year or next year when Trump gets into office, or when he's preparing, when the transition team needs to bring out the knives, like not literally, but like just to cut away at the deep state. To get all this crap out of here, because it needs to go. Otherwise, we're going to have more of the same, and there are going to be serious issues. It's going to be a very big year next year, and I'm excited, very excited. But I'm really not surprised by the donation numbers, because we said multiple times, you and me, on this program, as our viewers can attest, that these flashpoint moments only help Trump. And I mean, we kind of didn't predict it, because I really did not think they were going to convict him until we were in the real heart of this trial. Last week I was thinking, okay, they might do it.
I feel like I feel like I said that all along. I'm like, no, they're going to do it. Like, they're going to convict him. This has been such a dog and pony show the whole time.
I mean, I had more faith in them. I didn't think they were so stupid as to hand us this victory.
I have very little faith in my fellow Americans, especially when it comes to New York City. No offense, people. It's not all of you, but I'm just saying. I've taken a look around at what y'all have elected recently.
Yes.
My faith is fairly low in your Manhattan brethren.
But I mean, New York City ties into this both ways, because that's where the trial was, but that is also one of the hot spots of the biggest issues in American politics and American society as a whole, playing into the future of America, that is immigration. And that's what Biden turned around to face head on, supposedly, as soon as he saw that Trump had just taken the election, that the election was over. Biden's thinking, okay, well, now maybe I should start doing something about the biggest issue that is driving people to Trump. And he issued an executive order to restrict, or to tone down what qualifies for asylum, to restrict the number of people that can come in and claim asylum until the numbers get lower, and then they will allow the number of people claiming asylum to go back up. I was reading the DHS.gov summary of this, and it's so political, it's insane. One paragraph says, the administration has repeatedly called on Congress to provide the resources and legal authorities needed to secure our border. The measures announced today will better enable the departments to quickly remove individuals without a legal basis to remain in the United States, strengthening enforcement and change the calculus for those considering or crossing our border irregularly. However, there are no substitute for congressional action. We continue to call on Congress to provide the new tools and resources we have asked for to support the men and women on the front lines. What was repealed since Trump got out of office that made it so much harder to control the border?
I know. Nothing.
Exactly.
Nothing.
This is BS. This is
I was
just
about to say,
BS.
this is grade A, fresh sliced deli style bologna. Period.
It's complete crap. Like, you're not waiting on Congress to do anything. The laws are on the book. We have a border. That's in law. That the border exists. You don't need Congress to say, yes, we have a border, for you to stop letting people come across the border illegally. They're coming across illegally. The laws already exist, and you are the executive branch. You are responsible for the enforcement of the laws on the books. So you don't even need an executive, an executive order is one way of enforcing it, but you don't need Congress to pass border security.
No.
I mean, the border security bill from earlier this year was not a border security bill at all. It was let's set the new maximum numbers to 3 times the worst days during Trump presidency. I mean, that's literally what it was. It's that's opening the borders even more. But they're like, oh, we need this border security bill for Biden to do anything. His hands are tied. No, they are not. They are literally not. Trump built the wall. Trump shut down the border. Trump instituted travel bans for all sorts of nations coming over here, and you don't need new legislation to do mass deportations. You just don't. They can just happen.
That's not the legislator's job, period. I mean, at this point, you saw during the Trump administration, we saw a few things out of Congress. I mean, you want to talk about funding changes? Fine, that comes from the legislative branch. You want to talk about numbers changes in law? Fine, that comes from the legislative branch. But to your point, everything else at that point from there pretty much is enforcement. Guess who's the enforcement agent? The White House chief executive, and all of the federal agencies below him that answer to him, which is why, just like Trump had a few things go through Congress. I mean, the funding for the border wall, this and this and this. Yeah, sure, fine. The stuff that needed to go through the legislative houses did. And then after that, Trump did what he wanted. Remain in Mexico policy, the this, the that. And it was challenged every which way through the courts, but it never had anything to do with Congress. Because these were enforcement policies and enforcement agencies, and then people challenging those, which is why, you have to go to the court. You don't go to Congress to complain. So just like Trump did all of those good things, essentially, Joe Biden's administration waltzed in and undid them, stopped doing them, moved everything back to even pre-Obama, not Obama, but worse levels, like worse than anything we've ever seen before as far as what they allowed at the border. It was an executive decision, just like Trump's restrictions were an executive decision. There is no Congress needed. But of course, what happens in government? We all blame each other, which is exactly the whole thing. This is and to your point, this is such a blatant ploy. I mean, reading it is ridiculous, but alone on the face of the numbers, just the headlines, it doesn't even make sense. Because one of the biggest things, we're going to temporarily shut down asylum requests once the average number of daily encounters tops 2,500. Well, the Obama administration's numbers of unsustainable and overwhelming were 1,000. If there was 1,000 apprehensions at the border, all the ports of entry at the border in a day, that was a bad number. That was overwhelming the system. That wasn't even the Trump folks. That was the Obama folks saying that. And here, not 1,000. No. Once the average is 2,500, then we're going to go ahead and hit the stop button, the pause button. This is even outlandish compared to the last Democrat in office, who had terrible border policies. And it is wildly ineffective, inefficient, has nothing to do with the border, does absolutely nothing, and blames everyone else. It's a campaign ploy. 100%, it's a campaign ploy, which at this point, to your point earlier, I can't even imagine that this would move the needle for anyone. Anyone who cares about immigration is probably not going to have any motivation to move over to the Biden camp at this point. This certainly isn't going to do it for them.
Right.
So, I mean, what? Do they really think that they're giving the news something to crow about, that they're reaching for the middle ground? Like, why the campaign ploy now? Just trying to horn in on Trump's massive week of news because you convicted him and it backfired on you? I don't even understand what the rationale behind this is, even though I know why it's here, because it's certainly not to do anything on the border.
Yeah, he wants the people on the left that are flipping, because they are flipping. They are. They are coming over, because, I mean, I said this ties back to New York City. At least 15% of the hotels in New York City, and New York City is a big city, so that's a lot of hotels, are exclusively filled with immigrants. Exclusively. They're crowding out so that means if you want to visit New York City, the hotel rates are insane. And on top of that, who's paying for this? These migrants aren't coming over here and buying ritzy hotel rooms in New York City and paying for expensive food and taxi fares all around. They're getting these special cards from these NGOs that are funded by the governments of the world, specifically our government, and by charities. And who's paying the government? Us. If we're not paying them directly through income taxes, we are paying them indirectly through inflation. So we are paying the cost for immigrants to come into this country illegally, claim bogus asylum claims, and get put up in fancy hotels in New York City and get to live the high life of the American dream. And meanwhile, people who actually live there and work there well, all across the country, people who live and work all across the country are facing higher housing prices because of this. We're facing this plays a major role in inflation. John and Andy had a column just the other week about this issue, about how much immigration is impacting our economy. How I think like dollar stores across the country are closing because like they just can't. The inflation is so bad that they can't remain dollar stores. I mean, they haven't been dollar stores for years, but now they just like can't even stay afloat anymore. The immigration is ruining our economy, but that's not the only thing ruining our economy. It's also, what Biden's doing. He's doing numerous things that are hurting the economy. He's not stopping inflation. Like when you say inflation's going down, that still means inflation is happening. The prices are still going up. They're just going up at a lower rate than they were before. But you're not bringing the prices back down by making inflation go down.
And the rate numbers are bogus too.
Yeah. There's that.
Besides that,
on top of that, unemployment's terrible because our terms of trade have gotten worse since Trump was out of office, and energy is even worse. I mean, if we're not energy independent, if we're forced to import or use less efficient means of energy, that means, everything's connected in the economy. That reverberates throughout the entire thing. That means everything shipping across the country is more expensive. That means all electricity in every single warehouse for every single food item that you have in your pantry and you see at the grocery store, that's more expensive, which means all of the food is more expensive. And on top of that, all your bills are more expensive, and this is all because of Biden. You were richer under Trump. Everybody was richer under Trump, aside from the people profiting off of this very directly.
I was about to say there are a few people who are profiting off of it very directly, but to your point though, and the reason, like, that's the thing. You look at it and wonder where this gaslighting is coming from this executive order, but. Really, if you look, we have had a massive shift just in the last week, in large part, again, thanks to the Trump trial, the Trump conviction last week. There are a lot of folks who, to everything that you just said, there are people who are really kind of on the left across these industries who, even this, like the Biden administration's bungling of everything from economics to I say economics, from inflation and jobs to energy to the border to fill in the blank. It is so bad that even people kind of on that side of the spectrum are going, okay, look, you're inept. I need someone else. I don't want Trump, but I need someone else. This is definitely a ploy for that, because the straw that broke the camel's back, I think we will find out this year in 2024, really was the conviction, and that was even for folks on the left. Because I saw a rash of people, and not just Alan Dershowitz, who's technically a Democrat, but also on the Constitution really does understand due process and how it's supposed to work. But I saw people like even Dean Phillips, is he from Michigan, the rep who ran briefly in the Democrat Party primary. He posted, and it was pretty nasty. I wonder if I have it pulled up here, but here it is. His tweet after the conviction last week was not a Trump fan. He said Donald Trump is a serial liar, cheater, philanderer, 6-time declarer of corporate bankruptcy, and an instigator of insurrection, and a convicted felon who thrives on portraying himself as a victim. Governor Kathy Hochul should pardon him for the good of the country. Like, this guy does not like Trump. An insurrectionist, a cheater, a philanderer, a bankrupt. He hates Trump. But even he had to admit that this is terrible. The way that the process has been abused, this is bonkers.
Well, there is no more process.
That's the thing. The process is gone. The process is gone.
Jinx. We harmonized there.
It's true. You've been ranting. You need this more than I do. Have some coffee. I'm just kidding. I need my coffee. So
I had plenty.
I can tell. But this really is the conviction on top of the feckless Biden administration across the board. Everything from border to energy to jobs, to taxation, to regulation, to rounding up regular Americans and having the FBI do knock-in talks or yanking 75-year-old grandmas and throwing them in jail for going and sitting in an abortion clinic. These people have pushed even their own side too far. And I think that this kind of gaslit olive branch of the executive order, that's exactly what it is, but it is all too little too late. That's what I'm reading out of this. That's what I'm seeing. And I think that that's really where we are. And especially, to your point on the immigration issue you just ran through, this one really strikes a chord with people because it affects everything. It's affecting the housing market. It affects prices. It's affecting inflation. It's affecting jobs. It's affecting national security. we just talked about that. I was looking around. I mean, Todd Bensman was saying something similar. I mean, he said the whole thing. This is just baloney as well, but he was talking about how disingenuous it is when we saw what Joe Biden did, just bringing refugees over from Afghanistan, sight unseen, no vetting, no possibilities of anything. The country was in collapse. There's nothing to vet with, and then doing it again, asking for big Gazan refugee plans and all sorts of things. It's like, you don't want to limit anyone who's coming in. This is such patent, malarkey on its face. I'm done with this. But in the meantime, I saw Todd Bensman was posting something about, this is why, though, they're just going to start desperately throwing that baloney at the wall, because what we have prophesied is coming true. Or not prophesied, it's my word. But what everyone's predicted is coming true. The fact that the open, porous border, which I say porous, that's a pitiful word for it now, the wide open, non-existent border is resulting directly now in terrorist attacks. This happened. I mean, you remember the story about the Quantico, the box truck that tried to get into Quantico out in Virginia, the Marine base, the FBI's training headquarters.
When was this?
This was last month, May.
Really? I didn't hear about this.
The beginning of May. Here, this went off the radar, and you're about to figure out why. So, May 3rd, a truck tried to breach the Quantico Marine Corps base. And what happened is that the Biden administration and all of the agencies involved have essentially confirmed one of Americans' worst fears, and also, I think, a very politically consequential fact, that the terror attack came from someone who illegally crossed the southwest border. So on May 3rd, two guys, immigrants from Jordan, jumped into a truck, tried to drive the truck through a checkpoint, and were stopped by military police at the gate. However, one was a Jordanian immigrant who illegally crossed the southwest border from Mexico. The other was one who had overstayed his visa. He was illegally present, but a different way. Overstayed a student visa. They posed as Amazon delivery people. They got into a large box truck, tried to plow through the gates with the box truck. This is, the FBI Training Academy, military officer training schools, the military criminal investigations, and intelligence commands are all here in Quantico. So the attack was thwarted, and then they handed these guys over to ICE, who we trust greatly to deal with these things, of course. But the government has offered no information. They went radio silent on this back in the beginning of May, until it broke on a local channel that these were two illegal immigrants, and one of them had come across the border. Oh, and guess what? The guy who illegally crossed the border and joined his buddy who overstayed his visa, the border crosser was on the FBI terror watch list. And they tried to attack a military installation. Literally what we said could happen has now happened. The precedent has been set. The idea is there. The border is still wide open. This is about to become a recurring theme of what we see in America.
Wow.
And
You're telling me if we let known or suspected terrorists across our border just into our country, they might do terrorism?
They might do terrorist things,
Wow.
Terrorists be doing what terrorists be doing.
You're telling me now for the first time.
Yeah, this is new information for you, isn't it? Well, it's new information for a lot of former Biden voters. Notice I say former. And I think that, again, this is all just starting to come to bear. People are just finally figuring this out because they have done their best to get this all very quiet. They have done their best to not acknowledge this at all. But guess what? This is the worst fears of so many of us who've talked about the border issues finally happening exactly as we said it would. A guy on the watch list just crossed the border willy-nilly because we don't bother to secure the border, and he hopped in with another illegally overstayed visa guy. They jump in a box truck and try to attack a military installation. That's what else comes across the border. At this point, any of our enemies who hate us, whether your biggest fear is Russia or your biggest fear is China, you're both not wrong, but the China people are more right, is my opinion.
Or Islamic terrorists.
Or Islamic terrorists. If it's whether they're coming from Moscow, Beijing, or Tehran, someone hops across the border with a suitcase nuke. If you just have wide open border, who even knows? Right. You literally have no system of shutting down, forcing to checkpoints, vetting, making people stay on the other side until they're vetted, actually shoving them into the court date here and not just letting them go. It's also stupid, and yet it's exactly what's being done on the border. We're not securing the unsecured areas without walls or barriers of some kind. We let people in, they stay on this side, we give them a court date and a phone and an app, and then release them and they promise to come back. Are you kidding? I have a harder process getting on an airplane through TSA than they do getting across the border.
Yeah.
That's absolutely ridiculous. And they're attacking U.S. military installations now. Like, this is the big issue for many people. And the more that this kind of stuff rolls out, the more people realize whether my main concerns are national security or the economy or energy or anything else, all of these are touched by the destruction of our immigration system, the eradication of our border, and essentially the death of national sovereignty in America, without which there is no nation. No border, no sovereignty. No sovereignty, no nation, period. Done. This is a cataclysmic nation-ending event, series of events that we're looking at. And that's why I think that you're really starting to see, like I said, just the nuttiness of the whole Trump process. Like, oh my gosh, what can we possibly try to do, even if it's pretty thin?
Yeah.
What can we do as fast as possible? And all of it's backfiring because it is also thinly veiled. It's just political election interference, period, hands down.
Right.
And even if you weren't predisposed to see it, all these other problems, you're seeing it. That's the cherry on top. And there are tons of people, big donors, small donors, that are out. At worst, I think there's a bunch of people who don't necessarily vote for Trump, but they're done. They don't show up for Biden.
Yeah.
Which is what makes me curious about the whole, which that's a whole episode that we probably should spend time on. Why is the first debate so early? Why in the world did Biden's people agree to a debate? Is it solely for the purpose of getting him out before their convention so that they can switch to someone else? Do they even have anyone else palatable? I mean, Gavin Newsom's younger than Joe Biden, but like that's a whole separate interesting conversation.
I feel like Gavin Newsom might have a better shot than Joe Biden.
Better, but I'm going to say that's a marginally better proposition.
Yeah.
At this point, because of the terrible policies and because of how badly California's doing, the liberals are leaving California.
That's true.
The communists are leaving California. That's not true. They all live for free, naked in San Francisco, defecating on the sidewalks.
Naked and unafraid.
Naked and unafraid. Oh my gosh. Naked, unafraid, and on the welfare system.
Yeah, well, no, they're afraid. I mean, there's people wigging out on fentanyl in the streets of Los Angeles. So
afraid of real things.
Yeah,
though,
they're naked and afraid.
So that's it's all. I mean, this is all coming to bear very quickly, and it really, when you start to look at some of the stuff like this immigration story, put the pieces together, you see why they have accelerated. Even though it looks pretty flimsy, they have accelerated so much. The Trump trial, the ridiculous executive orders. That it's like, what's even the point? They literally don't know, but it is chaos. It has to be behind the scenes chaos of, oh my gosh, everything is falling apart. We have to do something to fix it. And everything that you try to do to fix it is so bad that it itself backfires on you.
Yes. Immigration it needs to be solved. That's why Trump has promised to do mass deportations on the first day of the presidency. It will probably be one of the most expensive executive efforts in U.S. history, but it is also one of the most necessary efforts in U.S. history, because if you replace all the people in a country, it's not even a ship of Theseus situation where it's like, oh, which one's the real one? No, it's like there's no more country. The people that made the country what it was, the Americans, make America America. If you replace the Americans with a bunch of non-Americans, it is no longer America. It is just a giant shopping mall. And that is what the left wants to turn this country into, just a giant shopping mall with a massive welfare state to transfer the money and the resources and the livelihoods, the property of heritage Americans, people whose families have been here for a century or longer, or even just, since the 20s, Ellis Island people, transfer everything that they own, everything they've ever received, over to newcomers, to Somalians and to Middle Easterners, to everybody that's not American. They just want to give everything to them. And we need to recognize that, this country is not going to exist anymore in any meaningful way if we don't stop this. They're recognizing this in Europe, which I wanted to talk a little bit about Europe too, because Europe's immigration crisis is insane. But and it's further along than ours, and they're waking up to the fact. I mean, in Ireland, they've been protesting for over a year now, but I was shocked when I found out that 22% of Ireland's population is foreigners. Over a fifth of Ireland is non-Irish. That is like, it's not even the same country. Like it's an entirely new demographic that completely, like, a country doesn't survive as the same country when that happens. It's over for Ireland unless they deport everybody.
And let's be abundantly clear about something here, because I know we have detractors at different points. And by the way, we're getting on the map on Rumble too, because I'm gonna have to head over and double check. But we're getting last week on Rumble, we had people spamming for their own, like we had spam in our chat. So congrats, folks! Y'all over on Rumble are absolutely making the videos blow up enough that we're now getting spam in the
people
in
sending
the
their
chats.
ads for other people.
Yeah, people sending us ads for this is a mark of success in my book. So congratulations, pat yourself on the back. But let me make abundantly clear for one point. There is a difference between, how do I say this? I'm trying to pick the right words. There's a difference between foreigners in your nation and people of foreign ancestry. That's very different. Because, I mean, America is a nation of immigrants. We have come from all over. But there's a very key difference between that and what we're seeing now. You're shoving foreigners into a nation, into a system that they have no way to comprehend. This is what's happening to Europe. Europe is ceasing to become Europe because they're not coming to France and to Ireland, or being shipped to France and Ireland, however you want to put it. They're not coming to these places to become a part of France. They are coming and bringing everything with them. Their culture, their religion, their form of government, their everything. And in a lot of cases, we are talking about theocracies in the Middle East that are literally incompatible with Western democratic style government, republics, monarchs, whatever it is. Like, it is wholly different. And they're not coming because they want to become a part of that system. They're just coming because of the wealth, or being brought because of the wealth, and then setting up their system here. I mean, we're seeing a microcosm of this in Minnesota right now, where this is a whole different animal.
Their flag to look like the Somalian flag.
That
is insane.
Is that real? Did that really happen?
I have a friend who lives in Minnesota, and he was telling me about it.
New Minnesota flag. Is this a real thing? No way.
Yeah, they changed their flag to like a knockoff Somali flag.
CNN even says Minnesota unveils new state flag after decades of criticism of the previous design. What was wrong with the previous design? It looked like all the other state flags.
They have literally been invaded by Somalians, and the Somalians have hoisted their flag over the state of Minnesota. Like, this is insanity.
Well, yes, indeed. It's just, if you do a quick Google search, or DuckDuckGo, whatever you use. Sorry, not trying to use Google as the verb.
What was their old flag?
Somalia has a light blue field with a star in the center. Our new Minnesota flag is a darker-ish blue field with a few more sides on the star, and then this nice little field of white coming in from the side.
Mostly the same colors and the same shapes.
Pretty much the same colors and the same shapes. Very interestingly enough. But of course, the old Minnesota flag, oh look, it looks like all the other state flags. It's got this beautiful little crest. It has some either Latin. That's not Latin. What is that? Is that French? No. Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, that's
French. And then it's got the dates on it. It's got a crest. It looks like a state crest. It is absolutely pretty much like all the other state flags.
It's literally colonialism.
Yes.
The
very thing that they accuse us of having done to everyone.
Which we did do that. I will say we did do that, and you are welcome, entire world, because that's why we have electricity. I mean, if you're watching this right now and you're pissed off by that, like, without Western civilization, without Western colonization of the entire world, without America being dominated by Europe, we would not even have computers or live streams to watch this on right now. You cannot, in good faith, participate in the system that the West has created and say it never should have been done in the first place. I think that's a ridiculous position. Because I don't think it's that different what we did to America and what non-Europeans are doing to Europe and America right now. I don't think it's that different, but I think our culture is better.
I was about to say, I know what you're about to say, and it's going to be controversial, and I'm about to agree with you and say the same thing. Let me back up, though. The point that I wanted to end on, the key difference is foreigners now versus people of foreign descent or foreign ancestry, or however you want to phrase it. Bring assimilation. This is the word. This is the primary word that is different. Because, again, I'm actually kind of curious if you want to know who in the United States of America are immigrants or children or grandchildren of immigrants. It's probably a huge number. And then you get to great-grandchildren, it gets even bigger. Again, very few of us were here all the way back, and even before
Right.
before the 1600s. Very, very, very few. But that is a different thing, because all throughout this time period of American history up until recently, people have come here to become American, to adopt the American values, even if they're not adopting every single thing. Obviously, they still speak a language, they still have cultural tastes and flavors and all kinds of things from which they came. In fact, a lot of them keep their religion. Fine. You're coming here, though, to adopt American values, to assimilate into our culture.
Right.
This is a whole different ballgame than what we're describing. Foreigners coming into a nation, foreigners making up the population. Right. A foreigner means you are not of here. And that, when I say, oh, you're a foreigner, that doesn't mean that you're non-white. That's not what that means. What that means is you're not an American. You didn't come here to become an American, to assimilate to America. That has nothing to do with what you look like or where you came from. That has to do with the values you want to adopt. This is not happening. The left is forcing foreigners into predominantly European heritage Christian nations. That's what I mean by that. Western civilization nations, to cease the Judeo-Christian values of that world. And that's assimilation is the key distinction. That's all I was going to say.
Because the
Irish, back to what you were saying.
The Irish were foreigners completely. I mean, the Irish were the total outsider immigrants for a while coming into the United States. And I'm half Irish. We assimilated, and now I'm practically a heritage American. I mean, it's been 4 or 5 generations since my ancestors got to this country, and the Irish became Americans. They became part of. But I think that it's a lot easier. It was a lot easier for the Irish, because I mean the Irish were literally neighbors with the English who established this country. Whereas Somalians, where even is Somalia? Very far away from Ireland and England.
Africa.
Yeah,
the Horn is over. Yeah,
very far away. They do not share any history with us. They share very little. They share no cultural history with us whatsoever. They are foreigners in every sense, not just physically, but their culture is entirely alien. And when you bring them over in droves, they're not going to assimilate because they're going to be in their enclaves. If you want to bring over people and assimilate, you can do it if you bring them over in very small numbers. But you cannot diversify the entire country and just expect it to work out. That's not going to work. There's going to be conflict between these different cultures and nationalities clashing against each other.
So here's what you were starting to say, and what I'm gonna back up and agree with, and then we should probably start to think about wrapping it down.
Well, we also need to talk about Germany, though.
Maybe we need to talk about Germany. But
a lot has been happening there.
Start to think about. I didn't say it's over, but to your point, this is one of those moments for us to just embrace and not run to politically correct cowardice. When the left says something about, you just made the point, oh, well, that's just what we did to the people here in North America. You know what? Yes. And we brought with us Christianity, Christian values, a respect for the dignity and value of human life. I'm not saying that this was always done perfectly. It wasn't. I mean, obviously, you start somewhere, you keep moving forward. Most did a big chunk of the founding fathers want to eliminate slavery then and there at the signing of the Declaration and the Constitution and moving forward. Yes. Did it happen until years later? No. But it happened. We've continued to move forward. It's not always done perfectly the first time when someone says, hey, I have an idea. But at each point, we have brought, and then from here started to export to other places in the world. And I don't mean to sound like the George Bush-isms. We exported freedom and democracy. No. We exported Western Christian values, which inherently brings more freedom, more liberty, more dignity to all. It does. That is the kind of society that is going to actually produce more freedom for everyone, including the people who don't necessarily subscribe to that value system. You go across the world to the godless communists, or the what did I hear someone say? The weird beard theocracies and ecclesiocracies out in the Middle East. These do not foster freedom, even for the adherents of that belief system, let alone for the dissidents to it. Christianity does the exact opposite. It actually fosters freedom for all. Everyone is brought up because of the belief of dignity and because of Christian values. So, what you were saying, you're welcome for exporting that to the rest of the world. It is not the same thing that you're doing now. Right. You're bringing in people to tear that down, to change it, to remove Christian values, to remove Western civilization, It has nothing to do with skin color. It has everything to do with values. That's what the fight over Western civilization is about. And I'm really sick and tired of people in America, the right wing especially, backing off of that argument because, oh, I don't want to, what? They're trying to insinuate that it's that you're a racist, that you're a bigot, that you're this. No, I'm an American. And that comes with a set of values it used to, and it ought to again. So it's time for us to embrace and just plow forward because they have no leg to stand on with that garbage, and yet we have all been cowed into political correctness for so many decades now. Everyone shrinks immediately. I'm really tired of it. And there have been a few people who've stood up for that and tried to articulate it, but they've been steamrolled because they didn't have anyone to back them up. I am grateful for the era of Trump because I think that has changed greatly, but we still have more to go. We still have more to go because the left is going to lie their pants off about everything, and we have to tell them, no, we're better than you. Our ideas are better than you.
Yes,
period.
We
Stop
are.
shipping in people who aren't, who don't believe in this system.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Germany.
Well, and also, I mean, I wanted to touch
and
on
everything
Ireland.
else.
One other thing about Ireland is they've started, if a housing area has been slated for migrant housing, they are literally burning them down now because they're saying, like in writing, like Irish only on the outside of empty houses, which is a good thing. I mean, they really need to make a difference in their country. Otherwise, there is going to be no more Ireland. It is going to be over. Same with Germany. Germany's facing the exact same issue right now, but these videos came out on social media last week. I don't know if you saw these at all, but of them singing like Foreigners Out. They were singing that in German and to the tune of L'amour toujours, which is like a 20-year-old techno disco song, whatever. It's a banger song, but they've been singing it with the words Germany for Germans, Foreigners Out in German, obviously. And it got a lot of attention. Everybody in those videos has been gotten doxxed by German media. They're trying to ban the song in Germany, which is insane.
Germany has a long history of banning things, don't they?
Yes, they do.
It doesn't work out well, guys. Just stop. Don't do it.
Yeah, and once upon a time, the left was like, oh no, we're the people that want to liberalize the cultural content that people can have. Now they are the overbearing schoolmarm that wants to say, you can't listen to this song, it's bad. And they're censoring it online, but people are still singing along. And then right after this was happening, there was some anti-immigrant protesters in Germany, or not even, they weren't even protesting, they just had like some sort of like advocacy station out in the street, and this Muslim terrorist comes up to them and starts stabbing them with knives. And one guy starts wrestling this terrorist to the ground, and the police tackle the guy that was wrestling the terrorist, and then the terrorist proceeds to get up and start stabbing the police officer that tackled the guy that was defending himself, and they shoot him after. But it's like insanity. Like it's the police are like treating it as worse to be like, oh, you might be a Nazi if you're against foreigners, so we're literally going to like die at the hands of foreigners trying to stop the anti-foreigners. Like I've seen the video a few times. It's insanity. Like I honestly can't believe it's almost comical. The shot of the police officer on top of the protester with the terrorist on top of the police officer is just nuts. But I think that the Alternative for Deutschland party in Germany is getting a lot of traction, which also means it's getting a lot of pressure from the government to shut down. The youth are very pro-AFD, and hopefully they're going to start making a difference for immigration in their country as we make a difference on immigration in our country, and maybe Western civilization can be saved. That's all I have.
There you go. I don't have a whole lot more to add. We've already said a lot of controversial things. But I mean, again, it's as an American, two-time World War champ, it is easy to make fun of. Speaking of which, we are broadcasting on D-Day, June 6th, 1944. Not the date that will live in infamy, a date which will live in victory. We didn't even spend, that should be a whole episode where we should do something on it. But I'll be doing stuff on that on the radio later today, because there is a lot to honor today. This is the 80th anniversary of D-Day, but it's easy to make fun of Germans for, careful when you guys ban things, and it is interesting, but at the same time, this is truthfully, that is one of the very interesting things about this, is because It seems touchier, even in Germany, for them to do that than over here. Oh, Germany for Germans. And it's like, ooh, that's kind of even gets your spidey senses tingling a little bit more than when we say America is for Americans, just because of the recent past in Germany, which is where this welcome to one of the arguments that the left, oh, you're just fascists. Nope, I am not looking for the centralization of government. That's 100% you. You're the one who is strongly centralizing the government under a dictator and punishing other people, running the capitalist society. That's called fascism. That's what you're doing.
Right. We're not fascists.
Joe Biden.
We're Caesarists.
We're Caesarists. Go see last week's episode with Charles Haywood if you didn't see it before. But that is a very interesting distinction to be made, though. It is not 100% locked in. You know, oh well, if you're arguing for some sort of nationalist perspective, you're obviously a national socialist. You're a fascist. No, pause. You are now creating a false assumption, whatever logical fallacy you want to run down. We could go down that. You throw that back in their face and say, no, nope. I'm not arguing for centralization. I am not arguing for authoritarianism or fascism. That's Joe Biden's job, and he's doing a lot of it right now. All of the left. This is, again, one of the specifics. I'm reminded with the German connection. Even we kind of get a little, ooh, Germany, you know. But really, though, do not let them make an inherent logical leap from one thing to this when that is not what you're fighting for. You're fighting for an assimilation of values. You are fighting for a return to a traditionalist system. That does not inherently mean some sort of authoritarian central figure, dictator. That's not what you're arguing for at all. We're arguing for society, the culture as a whole, to return there, which for us as Christians, that means self-government. Which is where decentralized government can thrive. When the society when the society actually operates and functions in self-governance, that's when you can have limited government. That's what we want. And that self-government really only thrives under Christianity and Christian values, which certainly had nothing to do with Hitler and fascism. Right. That was an occult weirdo, but it had nothing to do with it. So anyway, that's all I got. Is there anything else you got?
Nope.
Nope. Nothing?
Nope.
All right.
I'm all talked out.
Well, you talked enough. We've talked about a lot of stuff. I saw, by the way, one person over on YouTube, just as a side comment, said last night I had a dream I was on a spaceship with Phyllis Schlafly discussing education policy. Am I weird? We replied, did you decide to abolish the Federal Department of Education? It depends. Probably. We approve. Abolish the Federal Department of Education. But no, the point is, he said, I'm Canadian. Immigrants and their children are more than half of our population. And then again, that is very interesting. When we talk about immigrants, it's like, what do you mean by that? Do you mean assimilated immigrants or unassimilated immigrants? Because that's where I would argue the big difference is. That word assimilation more than immigrant is the crux of what we are arguing about here in America right now, and what is happening across Europe, what is happening in Canada. We're in very interesting times.
Yep.
Well, there you go. Trump got convicted. Steve Bannon's going to jail, and Joe Biden is running scared because they are going to get their heinies kicked in November. But then what happens in January, we don't even know yet. That's what we got. There you go. Unauthorizedcaucus.com is where you can go and catch up with everything. You can find the podcast and the live video feed recording as soon as we're done. You can also sign up for the email wherever you are on the social medias. Don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe buttons. Make sure that you don't miss out on any of the things, and share it with a friend. Rile up someone today who you know doesn't agree with us yet, but that's the key word, yet, because the more that happens, the more I think they're going to come over. We have to. We will win. That's the crazier stuff happens, and it gets darker and darker and scarier and scarier. And yet, in my opinion, the light at the end of the tunnel is getting brighter. I have great hope and optimism that is the case. So there you go. We'll see you next Thursday. If it's Thursday and it is noon, it will 100% be Caucus time.